What is up, everyone? I am Strifecore, and today I want to talk about Unity and 2D draw order. Now, there's a couple caveats to that. First of all, the particular situation I'm going to talk about is only really intended to be useful for like a top-down 2D, maybe Zelda-like sort of game. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into kind of what I want to talk about today. So I've been working on this project, and one of the things that I was struggling with was I wanted to figure out how to get sprite draw order to kind of work the way that I wanted it to work. And I was looking through the Unity forums, I was kind of looking at some tutorials online, and I did find something on the forums. I'm like, oh, this almost looks like what I want, but it's not. It wasn't really functioning the way that I wanted it to function. So I did what I do best, I guess, and I winged it. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the game project real quick, and then I'll go through what I did, and maybe this will help you. All right, let's go ahead and jump in here, start this. Also, I apologize for the small size of the screen. Let's go ahead and enlarge that. Okay, so as you can see, like, I finally have kind of pixels, rendering the way I want them to. So if you're in front of an object, you're rendering in front. If you're behind the object, it's rendering behind. I mean, like, it's a pretty basic behavior for 2D to, imitate depth. Don't worry about the red triangle following me around. It's harmless as of right this second. It may not always be, but anyways. So let's walk through what I did and why I did it the way that I did it. And again, I want to mention there are a ton of ways to solve this problem. The way that I solve this problem is not necessarily the best way. It's just the way that made the most sense to me. So let's go ahead and let's pull up code and take a look at it. So what I did is I created a script. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's just jump back to Unity real quick so I can show you a couple things. I created a script that I put on basically any of the objects that were in the game that were not like the background object of the game. So all of these, like, we have the enemy, we have the player, we have the tree. They all have obviously a sprite renderer on them because they're rendering a sprite. So I just wanted to point this out that all of them are on the same sorting layer, and they're all on the same order in layer. So the solution that I used does not use Unity's built-in order in layer or that system entirely. I do use it a little bit though. There is a, like, for the background objects in the game that's just meant to like be the floor or backgrounds or whatever, those are actually set to a different sorting layer than the default layer, so that it will always render behind whatever's in the default layer. But with that said, let's jump into how these objects are behaving. So I put a script on them, and basically this is all this script does. So I get the sprite renderer information from the object, and once I have the sprite renderer information, what I wanted to do was find the bottommost central Y point of that object, and then I wanted to take that and say, hey, is this bottommost point above or below other objects? That's kind of what this is doing, it as like a big picture, but more specifically, I'll walk through kind of like what this element of code is doing. So in here, I just created a temporary variable to hold this information that I wanted. So I took the transform position.y of the object, which, as long as it's centered in the middle of the object, this will work. If that's not centered in the middle of the object, this code will not work for you. And then I subtracted the sprite renderer bounds size y, which is the entirety of the y value of the sprite, And I divided it by 2 so that I would just have half that value, basically saying from the middle of the sprite, which is where the transform position.y is. And then I'm going to subtract that from the transform position.y so that I can get the bottommost y position of the sprite. Don't worry about the divided by 10 right now. I'll kind of explain that in a second. From there, I then take the transform position of this particular object and I just set it to a new vector 3. But the vector 3 just keeps the same x and y position that we had, but we reset the z position to now be relative to the y position. So essentially what this code is doing is for every object in the game, depending on the y position of the sprite, the base y position of the sprite, as it increases or decreases on the y-axis, it will also change on the z-axis. So the further up you go on the y-axis, the further back it will go on the z-axis. And the further down you go, the further forward it will go. And don't worry, I'll give like a visual example of like kind of how this is working. But the general idea is as you go up, you go back. As you go down, you go forward. So that anything that is in a lower y position, you're behind. Anything that's in a y position higher than you, you're in front of. So that's kind of the idea. Now, the divided by 10 part will become very readily apparent why I did that here in just a second. So I'm going to kind of pull up this screen and we're going to, oh yeah, you know what, I forgot. It's a little bit different between the 2 levels. So we're going to go ahead and start this. Boom, in game. Okay. So kind of keep at an angle here. And I want to show that like as you get here, you're actually behind the sprite. You can see like a little bit of distance. So as you move up, you're moving further back on the z-axis. You move down, you're moving in front. So a very, very simple system. I'm sure at some point it will have bugs. I'll find them when I get there. But anyways, that being said, as of right now, it's working really well for what I want it to do. The reason I have the divided by 10 is because the amount it was moving in the z-axis was like crazy. It was like woo that way and woo that way. And I was like, well, that's a little bit extreme, so maybe I should turn that down a little bit. Yeah, that's the only reason that 10 is there. So I'm going to drop this on the scripts that are in the scene, or objects that are in the scene. Drop the script on the objects that are in the scene. And with the exception of the environment and backgrounds, I don't really need those to worry about rendering in a certain way or not. That being said, I would love to hear what kind of solutions you've come across for kind of fixing your sorting layer, or your draw order. The reason I didn't go with the sorting layer and the draw order, or the technically I am using the sorting order, but the order and layer, the reason I didn't go with that is because it didn't have enough, it didn't calculate to a low enough point that it made it feel like it was comfortable to me. So the problem with the system I was using, or had seen other people use, was that it was kind of trying to use an order and layer, and then based on Z position, or not based on Z, based on Y position, it would change your order and layer. But because they are required to be integers and they can't be floats, or at least that's the situation I ran into. Maybe there's a way around that. You could technically get collision boxes that weren't big enough, and you could be right here and still render in front of the tree. I didn't like that, so I skipped that system altogether, and I was like, you know what, we're doing the Z. Alright, with that said, drop a comment below. Let me know how you solve this problem, or if you've run into this problem, or if this helped you. I'm StrifeCore. Thank you so much, and I will catch you all later.